All right, Alexa, where are you streaming from? I'm gonna give you a high five. Can you guys hear me? I'm kind of all right. I'm kind of a technology caveman, so let me know if this is working. I tried to plug it into the right place. I even said like a quick little prayer. Hope everything went okay. Can you guys hear me? It's 8:01, so if y'all have any questions or want to discuss anything, clarify anything, type now or forever hold your current level of information. What you guys want to talk about? Pop culture? Human movement in pop culture? Lexa, do you have any questions you want to break the ice with this morning? Okay, outstanding. So the first question, I'll do them in order. It's understandable to be confused about up or down rotation and elevation and depression. It's very logical. So let's think of function. I'm going to give you some functional examples to try to clarify the difference. When you're doing scapula shrugs, your scapula is going to elevate and depress. Usually elevation and depression is in the absence of shoulder motion. That's the simplest way to look at it. Your whole shoulder girdle is going to kind of be orbiting or rotating, but when your scapula, your shoulder girdle, your scapula does this while the same time your shoulder does this. In other words, to keep your arms down when you're lifting up things like your big bucket of water, you may want to elevate, or if your arm's already up in the air and you just have elevation and depression and your arm stays still, that's a way to extract or clarify elevation and depression. It's usually with a fixed arm, fixed rigid link, right? Fixed humerus, and then everything else connected to it. So elevation and depression would be like shrugs. We don't, a lot of people say it, but it's not correct. We don't say shoulder shrugs because it's not your shoulder joint. It's not like here's your glenohumeral joint, flexion, extension, abduction, internal, external rotation. Your shoulder joint doesn't dislocate and go up and down and then relocate. The scapula is going up and down, and what's happening is that as your scapula does this, your shoulder joint kind of adducts to keep your arm in a straight line, right? Plumb bobbing. So elevation and depression is and it really is a form of scapular rotation, but there's a lot of translation involved in the addition of rotation, general motion. The upward and downward rotation is like super duper rotated because that's what's going to happen with your shoulders to make sure your scapula leans to reposition your arm above 180. So like I said in the lecture, your glenohumeral joint, your shoulder joint, socket ball, it doesn't produce 180 degrees of abduction. It produces about 120, and the other 60 is because the scapula upwardly rotates. So for the purposes of this class, I'm going to differentiate between elevation and depression from upward and downward rotation with simultaneous shoulder motion. In other words, when the arms go up, scapula is going to lean to reposition that socket. Upward rotation. When the arms come down, scapula is going to deposition that socket. Elevation and depression is going to be in the absence of arms moving, or in my case, flailing around. Dancing with a partner. Did that summarize that or clarify the difference for what the purposes of this class is going to be? Okay. You're very welcome. Okay, Lexa, let me clarify. And thank you for asking, because as a dyslexic, sometimes what I think is clear isn't always clear. So I need you guys to call me out on that to make sure we're all on the same page. You have 2 hours to take the test. 2 hours. There's 50 questions, and you have 2 hours. So I guess technically, if you wanted to start at 8, you can, but you have a 2-hour window for those 50 questions. So I would start at 7:30 and get as much of that time as you can. So I hope that helps clarify that. Great question. Thank you for asking. I didn't mean for it to be misleading or ambiguous. Cool. Crazy hair. I got crazy hair. Okay. I find it hard to determine what plane the shoulders move through. I always think it's frontal. It can be frontal. If you're doing jumping jacks, that's rotation in the frontal plane. Think of it like this. To try and simplify things, think about the 3 ways. Let's say you were working with a child as a therapist and you wanted to assess if the child could rotate their whole body in 3 different planes. Think about the task you would ask them to do. You'd ask the child maybe to do a front roll or a back roll to simulate sagittal plane full body rotation, right? Sagittal plane. Now, to simulate frontal plane, you'd ask the child to do a spin like a cartwheel. That's a full body rotation. So that would be rotation in a frontal plane. So imagine I had a fan, like one of those little portable fans, that the kind you used to blow into. I used to blow into when I was a kid to be like I was Darth Vader, and it'd be blowing. I'd be like, "Luke, I am your father," right? So if the fan is facing the screen, that's frontal plane spin, as I see it. If I turn the fan like this and now it's blowing air to the side, the fan is spinning in my sagittal. And if the fan were to tip over on the back, it'd be spinning in the transverse, okay? So there's two different techniques to find the right answers. You could either see the dimension of spin and then know what axis it has to spin about, or understand the axis it has to spin about and then thus doth, if we want to go Shakespearean, see the plane. What I mean by that is, if I'm rotating my shoulders like this, like you said, you may be like, I'm not quite sure of the plane. So you can imagine the axis. So in other words, if I'm rotating like this, the fixed point that it's rotating about has to be here, right? That's an anterior posterior fixed point. That's an anterior posterior axis. And so the rotation has to be frontal plane. If I'm rotating like this, you say, well, where's the fixed point? Well, in this case, the fixed point is bilateral, so the rotation has to be sagittal. And if I'm rotating like this, where's the fixed point? Fixed point polar, rotation has to be transverse. So I personally, I see spin. It's easy for me to see, hey, am I spinning here? Am I spinning here? Am I spinning there? So for the case of my shoulder, I in my mind, I say, hey, what if my shoulder kept, I know it has endpoints, it can't keep spinning forever, right? We're not made like tires, but what if it could? What if my shoulder could just keep spinning? And so I create the spin of the fan, right? What if it kept spinning? It spin in the frontal, and then I understand that it has to be about an AP. What if it just kept spinning? If it kept spinning, it would spin like this. If it kept spinning, it would spin like that. If it kept spinning, it would spin like this. So see the plane, understand the axis, or see the axis and understand the plane. It doesn't matter to me. I just want right answers. So different people have an easier time seeing one or the other. Thank you for that feedback. I'm going to have to remember that fan analogies work. Sometimes I'll just come up with these things. So I like to know when certain analogies are effective. All right, we broke the ice. What else you guys want to talk about or clarify on? Oh, totally. It's tougher for you guys and it's tougher for me, because I had to revert to as many lectures as I had with students, because at least I'm getting feedback. At least I'm using analogies, because I'm an analogy guy. And so I use a lot of analogies. And so without that feedback, I have no way of knowing if that analogy is like a check, or if that analogy is like like on X Factor. Maybe no judges turn around with a bad analogy. But we gotta adapt, improvise, and overcome, right? So that's where I'm hoping that maybe these sessions, and listen, if this works out real well, maybe we could do more of them. If this really helps you. How do you see the rotation of the elbow? How do you see the rotation of the elbow and down it? Jasmine, I think that you might have had an autocorrect. How do you see the rotation of the elbow? Oh, maybe does it differ? How do you see the rotation of the elbow, and does it differ? Does it differ from his perspective? Okay. I tell you what, Jasmine, what page or what because I want to make sure I'm seeing the exact same thing. So I'm leaning over here. I'm not tapping into my hash brown yet, but I'm leaning over here to pull up the notes that I posted for you guys, so that way I know we're seeing the same thing. Okay. So is this in topic 1 lecture notes? Is that for the lecture notes for Monday or the lecture notes for Tuesday? Because I want to make sure I'm seeing the same picture as you. Is that which notes is that? Monday? Okay. Thank you. I am Pulling up those lecture notes. All right, here we go. Okay, let's see, elbow. Okay, so is it, let's see, is it page 10? Oh, yeah, yeah. So just to make sure, is it that picture? Yeah, page 10 picture. Okay, so the key thing with perspective is I'm going to give you a couple different ways perspective is important. One of the ways is rights and lefts, right? It's something I emphasize in the lectures. Like now, if you're going to do an amputation or a surgery, the nurses or the prep docs will put big X's on the side they do not want you to cut, because the doctor's left and your left are two different things, right? So perspective is really important. Um, Perspective is also important for planes and axes in human motion to make, and again, why do we have perspective? To make sure we're all on the same page, right? To make sure to lessen the chance of miscommunication. Um, so the first thing is from a local perspective of your eyes. What do your eyes see? In lecture, I talk about the eyes being like the coach, right? The coach sees the whole field, or the coach is supposed to see all the different positions and how they're working together. The individual players, I mean, you could argue, yeah, they care, but the individual players are really more concerned about what they do specifically. In our body, our individual players are, what does the wrist see? What does the elbow see? What does the shoulder see? What does the knee see? But our eyes have a perspective because I literally can see what all these different players are doing. So, local perspective of my eyes. Let me give you an example of how this can change. What type of rotation do I see? I see sagittal, right? That's literally the dimension that my eye is seeing rotation. But if the rotation stays here and I turn my head this way, I no longer see sagittal. Now, you are seeing sagittal, but I'm not seeing sagittal. I'm seeing frontal, and you are seeing sagittal, and that's okay. As long as we communicate who's seeing what, whose perspective is that rotation being viewed on. So with the picture here, I see, if you're looking at that picture and you say, how is the elbow spinning based on how I am looking at it? That elbow is spinning like this. That's my frontal. Let's pretend here's his humerus and here's his lower arm, and he's flexing and extending. I am seeing frontal plane rotation. He is looking at it like this, and he's doing this. He sees sagittal. He sees sagittal, and I see frontal. And that's perfectly okay as long as we communicate who's seeing what's perspective. Perspective is really important because it helps us to avoid traps and confusions and illusions of motion. Things that look like it might be doing something, but it's not, or things that look like they're not doing anything, but they are. So that's why it's important to set the precedent of perspective moving forward. So that picture right there, his sagittal, because that's what he sees, my frontal, because that's what I see. Does that help? And Jasmine, thank you for that question. Yay. What a great question. Did you guys understand that I am allowing you to have your notes? Okay. You it's not a group test, but you can have your notes. I'm going to let you guys do that. Okay, Lexa, I'm still not clear on translation versus rotation. Yeah. So you understand more of it than you think. Okay. So first, I'm gonna start off with extremes. I always like to discuss things that live in the middle with the extremes, the boundaries, right? So in biomechanics, which what we're doing is kind of a form of biomechanics, you have something called pure translation. In other words, all straight line, not a little bit of spin. So for my pin to purely translate, every point has to move the same equidistance. There's none of this. Okay. Pure rotation is every point is spinning about a fixed point and it ain't going anywhere. There is no translation. Uh, if the pin is spinning, let me use my phone. If my phone is, let me use something smaller. All right, let me use my ID. If my ID has pure rotation, that means the center of mass of the card isn't going up, down, left, right, front, back. It's not going anywhere. Think of a merry-go-round. A merry-go-round is a great example of pure rotation. Is it moving? Yes. Is it going anywhere? No, because as you spin it, it moves, but the merry-go-round ain't going this way, that way, up, down, left, right. It stays in the same place. Okay. Another example of pure rotation is if a car is jacked up, like maybe they're changing the tires or spinning or rotating the tires. If the car is off the ground and they just spin the tire, is it moving? Yes. Is it going anywhere? No. That's pure rotation. Pure translation would be jacking the car up, moving it straight up with no spin. Okay. General motion is a combination of both. That's the world we live in. We live in a combination. We live in a world where when you're driving, that tire is both rotating and translating. We rotate to translate. So the tire, let me get this little cap off of the bottom. So what we see a lot is general motion, spin plus shift. And what's important for us to do is, and this is an introduction, I'm not asking you guys to do more than just understand, is extract what is rotational versus what is linear. And the easy way to do that is linear is XYZ. Is it moving in the X? Is it moving in the Y? Is it moving in the Z? Then it's translated. Is it spinning in the sagittal? Is it spinning in the frontal? Is it spinning in the transverse? Then it's rotating. Okay. So imagine throwing a baseball. The translation movement is the ball going X, Y, or Z? And the rotation is the ball spinning and how is it spinning? How is it moving and how is it spinning? Hey, I overcomplicate stuff all the time. It's not a problem. Sometimes we just need to kind of use these extremes to kind of make sure we separate because again, life and human motion is a combination of those things and it gets blurry. It gets blurry. Oh, Jasmine, can we go over all of the notes from lecture 7-6? Can we go over all of the notes? Let's see. What lecture from 7-6? I don't think I have it listed. Is it what day? I have the day and I have the date. So maybe you can clarify which lecture specifically. 7-6. Does that mean the 6th? That means again, I just want to make sure that means Monday, July 6th. Is that what that means? It may be from pages 12 and 13. Okay, let me check it out. Let's see. From Monday. Gotcha. Uh, okay, so Jasmine, is one of the things, what is the position of the knee? Is that one of the questions? I think I have, yes, okay, page 12. Okay, so from the videos, I explained that where are you at and where are you going is a very common concept that we use all the time. If you're going to give anybody directions, you're first going to, if you're on the phone with them and you're trying to give them the directions to meet up with you, what's the first thing you're going to ask them? Where are you at? Because how can you communicate where they're going to, where they got to move if you don't know where they're at? Anatomical position for us is a human body's where are you at? It's home. Home for us, the university speaking, is Lafayette. So if I say um, my father is east of Lafayette, let's say he's in Baton Rouge, right? Baton Rouge is east of Lafayette, but Baton Rouge is west of Mobile. So again, west and east is relative. You have to have a reference to make all of that make sense. So again, for us, it's anatomical position. So looking at that picture, if I say, what is the position of his knee joints? Where are they at? Where are they at relative to what? In reference to what? Anatomical position. His knees are flexed. They are in a flexed position. Remember what I told you guys about what flexed means? That means more in fetal. Flexion means moving in the fetal position. So his knees are more fetal in that position than they would be in anatomical. Where is he at? That's what position is asking. Now, where are you going? There's two ways to ask where are you going with still pictures. One is a before and an after. My father started out, there's a picture of him in Baton Rouge that says, "Welcome to Baton Rouge." And then there's a picture of him that next to a sign that says, "Welcome to Lafayette." Well, if I know he started in Baton Rouge and he ended in Lafayette, I know he had to be traveling west. Another way we can look at motion is with a picture and then say, "Hey, are you heading home or are you heading away from home?" So my father takes a picture, "Welcome to Baton Rouge," and I say, "Dad just left for vacation." So he was in Lafayette, he's passing through Baton Rouge, he has to be moving east. And if I say Dad's heading back from vacation, he's moving west. Same position. He's still east of Lafayette, but whether he's traveling west or traveling east is based off of, is he going away from home or towards home? So with that knee picture, if I said, what's the position of the knees? His knees are flexed as compared to anatomical position. If you observe motion of the knees away from anatomical, he'd have to be undergoing flexion because flexion of the knees is going to take him further away from home, anatomical. If I say he's moving his knees towards anatomical position, then he would have to be undergoing extension. We don't assume, but we can infer. I've given you enough information. You know the position he's in, and you know how he has to be moving, whether or not he's going home or away from home. Okay. Position of the shoulder. I'm in a flexed position. Specifically, my right shoulder is flexed. And once again, I can infer motion based on whether I'm going towards home or away from home. If I'm moving my shoulder towards anatomical position, I would see extension. And if I'm moving my shoulder away from home, away from anatomical, I would observe flexion. Cool? Um, I would suggest going rewatch those position change lectures. Maybe after I explain this to you in detail, maybe those lectures might kind of, okay, that makes sense now. East of east, west of west, being west, but moving east, being east, moving west. That's what all this is about. So maybe if you go rewatch that lecture today, it would kind of, maybe it would absorb differently. Thank you for that question, Jasmine. Guys, remember, maybe you didn't see my welcome video, but if there's some things you need clarifying, ideally I would prefer it if it wasn't at the last minute, but you have my cell number and text me. This is who I am. This is the class I'm in. This is where I'm stuck. And we'll find a time that I can FaceTime you or call you, and we'll clarify any of those confusions. Okay. So that's a service above and beyond I'm offering because I know it's a little tougher not to meet in person every day. Believe me, I would prefer it doing it in person as well. Obviously, we can't right now, so I'm willing to do those kind of things to try to make sure there's understanding. Ooh, what a great question. What a great question. So the answer to your question is we need to clarify whose frontal plane, right? So abduction could occur in any one person's sagittal, frontal, or transverse, but it can only happen in the pelvis's or the trunk's frontal plane. In my shoulder lecture, I explained that because of the ball and socket nature, it's so dynamic, we have to assign specific planes to specific bones. And for the shoulder, the socket owns sagittal and the socket owns frontal. And that way, you can flex and extend regardless of if you're externally rotated or internally rotated. This is flexion and extension because it's owned by the socket's perspective. This is ab and adduction. Here's one way to look at this. If we looked at flexion and extension from the long bone's perspective, then this is flexion extension. If I move my whole body over the side, this would be flexion extension. We know that's not the case, right? I'm going away from 6 towards 6. So a couple reasons why that can be false is if you're doing ab and adduction in someone else's perspective, like you're doing jumping jacks in someone else's sagittal, that's perfectly okay. Also, the variation of ab and adduction, horizontal ab and adduction, it's like taking the clock away from 6 towards 6, taking the clock and laying it down, meaning that if my clock hand is vertical and I lay the clock down, I'm still facing 6 o'clock and I could go away from 6 towards 6. That's from the sockets or pelvis's transverse plane. Remember, you can't move in horizontal AB and adduction in anatomical. All 3 dimensions are taken: flexion, extension, ab, ad, internal, external rotation. The analogy I give in the lecture is I-20 up in Shreveport runs east and west, and I-10 in Lafayette runs east and west. But if you're on Interstate 10, the only way you can travel on the 20 road is if you go up 49. Now you could travel down the Interstate 10 road. So there's a variation of ab and adduction in the trunk or the pelvis's transverse plane that's called horizontal AB or adduction. So that would be another way where technically ab and adduction, or at least this variation, is not in the frontal plane. But to your question, when is it always in the frontal? When we're talking about the perspective of the joint itself, from the perspective of the shoulder joint, ab and adduction will be in the socket's frontal plane. Yep. Lexa, confirm that was a. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I wanted to make sure that worked. And you know what else I appreciate? I appreciate you emphasizing the B and the D, because I tell you, man, that it's so subtle. I think in my lectures, I usually use the examples of friends of mine from high school that I graduated with, Heath and Keith. They looked nothing alike. They acted nothing alike. But growing up, we'd mix up their names all the time just because they were brothers and they sounded so close together. So it's the same with ab and adduction. They sound so close, it's easy to flip them. Lexa and Jasmine, y'all are my all-stars today. Keep them coming. What the old cliche when I was growing up, smoke them if you got them. Well, ask them if you got them. If you got questions, shoot them my way. I enjoy this. I enjoy interacting with students. It's something I thoroughly enjoy. So any questions you guys have? Yeah, the shoulder is really the the shoulder's tricky because the scapula stuff kind of gets in the way. So watch, I give an example of when I just move my shoulder joint, this is what I get. When I add the scapula, I get all of this. So the scapula's role in human motion hides a lot of what's happening at the glenohumeral joint. So yeah, man, the shoulder and it makes sense too. The more you move, the harder it is. Like the elbow only has two motions, about one axis and one plane. As easy. You either this or you're that. The more you add, like the wrist is biaxial. There's more stuff there. And the shoulder's triaxial. It's the most. Imagine an etch a sketch with a third knob. You got the left, right, you got the up, down, and then you have like you have the up, down, left, right, and then you had like a depth knob. That would make be crazy. That's the shoulder. Yeah, the shoulder is because it's the most dynamic. It has the most movement capabilities, so it gets crazy. But that's why one of my tips that I put in the commandments is analyze motion joint by joint. If you're trying to analyze shoulder position and motion, don't be distracted by what the wrist is doing or the elbow's doing or the scapula, or don't be distracted. Just focus on what's the position. What's the position? How does the position change? How is it moving? That's one of the tough things about human motion is that if you're not trained to just look into these specific joints, distractions happen. It could be very distracting when you're trying to analyze motion. So we analyze motion joint by joint, and don't get distracted by all the bells and whistles that upper extremity stuff can provide. Okay, well, if you don't have any other questions, uh, don't think of it as I won't answer any more questions. So feel free to, again, text me. Uh, I'd say email, but y'all, my email is possessed, man. I get a lot of stuff sent to trash or sent to junk, even from my boss. Like my boss, I won't get emails. I have to check my spam filter, but yet I get every spam email in my regular inbox. Go figure. So if this is all the questions for now, that's fine. Feel free to rewatch this video as many times as you want. Like I said, maybe watching this video again and then going back to some of the previous lectures might solidify some of those concepts as well. So Jasmine and Alexa specifically, I want to kind of get a thumbs up that y'all are okay for me to end it and save this. I'm going to post this to Moodle as well for your reference. Are you guys good? Oh, you're very welcome. And like I said, I'll be happy to do these more if y'all feel it'll help. Uh, I know not everybody's on the same schedule. That's why I was like, well, if I'm going to do one, I'm going to do it when we don't have regular lectures and it's during regular scheduled class time. So, all right, guys, listen, I want A's. Okay, y'all are a reflection of me. So the better you guys do in this test, the better I can try to think that I did as a teacher. Okay, so I don't want anyone to fail. I don't want anyone to do bad. I want everyone to do good. All right. Y'all hit me up if y'all have any questions. Y'all have a good day. See you tomorrow.